Hey everyone, welcome to another Lockdown Lessons Live. I hope you're safe and well wherever you are, and I hope that you're warmer than you were last week in all that snow. We're beginning another week of our lockdown lessons. We're going to be here, as we've talked about, until the end of lockdown, providing free educational content and also a resource for you to be able to access content and ask us questions, basically. If you have a question about an aspect of English that you're not sure about, please do get in touch. We're here to help, and we're going to be here until the end of lockdown. So the first thing I must do really is apologise for my last lesson, which was a little rambly, and particularly for the terrible metaphor that I decided to talk about, which I think was a rubber hamster. But I don't know where on earth that came from, and I can only apologise because it was completely silly. Today, we'll be looking at how to become a better writer, how to improve and become a better writer. And this is relevant because life is very much about improving and reflecting. Over the weekend, I reflected and shook my head and thought, why on earth did I start talking about a rubber hamster on live YouTube? I don't know why. But that reflection is very much part of learning. Today's lesson is about becoming a better writer. And in many senses, whatever we do, whether it's teaching, whether it's plumbing, life is very much about improving on what we've done before. So I reflected on my rubber hamster scenario, and I really shouldn't say rubber hamster now because I've said it far too many times already. But learning is very much about reflecting and also about recognising that we are not the finished article. We are not... Learning doesn't have a destination, it's very much a journey. And that's what this lesson is about. This lesson is about how to become a better writer. And part of what it means to become better at something is reflecting on it, looking back, thinking about what went well and what didn't, and improving. So today's lesson is about improving our writing, becoming a better writer. And the first thing that I'd like you to look at is something that I learned almost in another lifetime about 20 years ago when I was working in business. And it is called the conscious competence model. And it's an interesting way of looking at how we learn. So we're looking at this model, but in mind of what we're looking at today more broadly, which is becoming a better writer. So here we have the conscious competence model. And just before I do that, I'd like you to answer this question, please. What is learning? What is learning? Perhaps what does learning feel like? What is becoming better at something? If you can answer that in the chat now, that'd be great. And I will begin explaining what on earth this conscious competence model is. So this is a way of showing how we learn. And learning, as we're all probably quite aware, can be sometimes easy if we've got a lot of ability in something, or sometimes quite painful. When it comes to maths, it's quite painful for me because I was never really great at maths at school, and sometimes when I hit upon a problem, it makes me feel bad. It makes me not humiliated, but it certainly affects my confidence. So learning can affect our confidence. When we get things wrong, actually that's part of learning. When we get things wrong, that's part of learning. And also, it can be really, really helpful. But learning is challenging. What does it feel like to get better at something? So this is the conscious competence model. And as you can see, it's a little table, and there are 4 parts to this table. And we've also got these words, unconscious and competent. So if you look at the bottom, conscious means awake, aware, you know what you're doing. So if you're conscious, you're aware of what you're doing. And if you're competent, you're able to do something, okay? Competence is about your ability to do something. And this table, this tool, goes from left to right. And it's a way of thinking about where you are in your learning process. So today we're thinking about writing. What are we like as a writer? So let's have a look at the model. So you begin unconscious incompetence. And what that means basically is you are not aware, and incompetence means you can't do it. So that's where we all start, unless we're particularly naturally able. We start being not aware and not being able to do something. But then we swiftly move on to conscious incompetence. And conscious is about being, as I've said, awake and aware. Conscious incompetence, this is the second stage. And what that really means is you are aware and you're awake to the fact that you can't do something. It sometimes feels, this particular part of learning, quite uncomfortable, but it's also really good because you know that you're not completely able to do something. You know there's something wrong. So that's the second stage, conscious incompetence. Then we move on to unconscious competence. This is where you're not really aware, but you can do it. It's a bit like maybe the first time you try roller skating. You put your roller skates on and you wheel down a road and you're roller skating. You're not totally in control of what you're doing, but you can do it. You're just not quite sure how. So unconscious incompetence. You're not really aware, but you can do it. And the last stage, the holy grail of learning, is conscious competence. This is to do with being awake, being aware of what you're doing, and being able to. And this is very much the ideal for writing, being aware of what you're doing and being able to complete the task in a controlled and competent way. Now, it's interesting when we think about writing, because I've already proved to you with my rubber hamster scenario that we can get things wrong. And certainly as a writer, I get things wrong very frequently. It might be a spelling mistake that I make and I have to look up a word. It might be I've missed a word out, which is often a thing that I do when I'm writing. Sometimes I miss a word out. But we're not perfect all the time, and we need to reflect on what we need to do to improve. And it's actually really healthy to be in this second part of the conscious competence model, being aware that you can't do something. And it's very dangerous to be unconsciously competent, to not be aware and to complete the task. Sometimes that's quite a dangerous place to be, particularly in writing. This lesson is about how to become a better writer and have a think when it comes to writing. What are you? Are you aware of what you're doing? Do you know what you're getting wrong, or are you not aware? So that's the first question. Do you know what you're doing? Are you able to do what you want to do when it comes to writing? Or do you sometimes make a mistake that you're not aware of? So writing well, becoming a better writer, is also about becoming a better learner. It's about knowing what you want to do and being able to do it. And if you can't do that, that means that there's a problem back in the line and a problem to solve. Okay, so that's the first part of the lesson. It's just thinking about where you are as a learner. Do you know what you're doing when it comes to writing? Are you able to put your ideas down on paper? Or are you not aware of what you're doing, but you have an ability today's lesson is about becoming aware of what you're doing and being able to do it. So let's have a look at some examples of writing. The first example I found yesterday in a book that my granddad gave me, which is called Reportage, and it's accounts from history, first-person accounts from history. And the first one that we're going to be looking at is written by a man called Lunardi, and Lunardi was the first person to complete a manned flight in England, and this happened in the I think the middle towards the end of the 18th century, 1750 I think it was. So quite early on, the first manned flight in a balloon. And actually in recent times, Lunardi's made some, well, he hasn't made anything recently, he is long dead, but there's been films about the first balloon flights, I think you've probably seen on Netflix. Anyway, this is an account, part of an account, about his first balloon flight in the UK, the first manned flight ever in England, and I'd like you to look at this account and think about what is good about it, and I'd like you to think about particularly whether or not he is controlled and consciously competent. Is Lunardi aware of what he is doing, and can he do it? Let's have a look, and I will read it to you. So this is, oh yes, not 50s, 1784, the first manned flight in England by Vincent Lunardi. He was the person that manned the balloon, and it happened in 1784. So quite a long time ago. So let's have a look at it. Try not to think so much about the vocabulary, but try to think about, well, whether he is aware of what he's doing. The importance of the multitude made it unadvisable to proceed in filling the balloon so as to give it the force it was intended to have. So while I read this, guys, have a think. In the chat, is this controlled, and is he conscious of what he's doing? I'll start again. The impatience of the multitude made it unadvisable to proceed in filling the balloon so as to give it the force it was intended to have. The process being there, I retired for a few minutes to recollect and refresh myself previous to my departure, when a servant brought me a sudden account that by the falling of one of the masts which had been erected for the purpose of suspending the balloon while filling, it had received material injury which might possibly retard, if not prevent, my voyage. I hastened instantaneously from the armoury house where I was then. I know I was happy to find that the accident was prevented by giving the falling fixture an opposite direction. Yet I was so extremely shocked at the danger that was menaced to me and the word I had received that I did not possess myself to recover the effect of my apprehension during the remainder of my stay on earth. Wow, that is quite an account. Certainly reading it yesterday, I was very interested. This was the first manned flight in England, and that is a historical moment. Lunardi might well have been a fantastic, I don't know what you call it, aeronaut, there we go, aeronaut, but was he a good writer? What do you think? Was he a good writer? Have a look again, and I won't read this time, have a look. Was he good at what he was doing? Did he know what he was doing? I think arguably he didn't. He didn't know what he was doing. And apart from the quite complicated vocabulary, what is particularly noticeable to me is that the sentences are uncontrolled. They go on a bit. And they are, they're kind of like verbal diarrhea, really. Let's have another look again. So towards the end, well, actually the first sentence is incredibly long. If you look at it, it ends at voyage, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down. So an enormously long sentence. And because it's so long, actually the sentence is really difficult to read. It's really difficult to follow what is happening. So let's have a look then at another piece of text which is a bit different and I think different in the way it's structured. So this is Roald Dahl again. Some of you might already have seen this article on these lessons before, this extract on these lessons before. Have a think about whether this is controlled. How, and if you can answer in the chat please, how is this different? How is this piece of writing different from Lunardi's? This is Roald Dahl, and this is an account of an accident that he had while flying a plane. And have a think whether this is controlled. Why is this one or better? Why is it better? Or maybe you think Lunardi's better. Why is that? Please write in the chat. I flew straight for the point where the 80 Squadron airfield should have been. It wasn't there. I flew around the area to north, south, east and west, but there was not a sign of an airfield. Below me there was nothing but empty desert, and rather rugged desert at that, full of large stones and boulders and gullies. At this point dusk began to fall, and I realised that I was in trouble. My fuel was running low, and there was no way I could get back to Fuka on what I had left. I couldn't have found it in the dark anyway. The only course open to me was to make a forced landing in the desert and make it quickly before it was too dark to see. What is different about this one? What is different? Is it more controlled? Well, you can certainly see there are more sentences. In Lunardi's there are 2 and many, many words. In this there are many sentences. I wonder what the effect of that is. What is the effect of these many sentences? Well, sentences are about sense, making sense of the world through language, through written language. And without that very clear structure of sentences, Roald Dahl's story becomes quite unreadable. If Lunardi's story wasn't about something historic, I'm not sure it would be passed down to history because it's so difficult to read. Roald Dahl's writing is much easier to read. There are very clear sentences there. If you look at that second sentence there, it's very simple, 3 words. It wasn't there. You've got that subject, that description, and it's very, very simple and very clear to understand. So Roald Dahl's ideas here are much more consciously put together. They're much clearer. And what this does is it enables the reader to make sense of what is going on. What is your writing like? Does your writing help the reader make sense of what is going on? Is the reader something that you think about? Because you really must think about that, because if your sentences go on and they last for quite a long time, then you might lose the reader. An old professor of mine said to me that avoid writing sentences that are longer than 2.5 lines long. This is typed, because the reader will struggle to make sense of it. And really that's what writing is all about. Yes, we want to make the reader imagine, make the reader turn the page, as I've said in past lessons, but we also want the reader to understand what your ideas are on the page, to make sense of them. And if, like Vincent Lunardi's, you've got 2 sentences and they're incredibly long-winded, then it's going to be quite difficult to make sense of. But if you use sentences like Roald Dahl's that are more controlled and briefer, fundamentally briefer, then you've got a chance of the reader understanding what you're trying to say. And that's essential, really. This is about making the reader understand. And for the reader to understand what you're writing about, you need to make sure your sentences are controlled. And even though it's quite dangerous of me to say, try and keep your sentences short, I don't necessarily mean that, but I certainly mean try not to write really overlong sentences. It might seem like a long way of saying this, but it's really, really important. Sometimes our pen runs away and we have to control it. So we're going to look now at controlling our sentences and basically introducing or reintroducing to you simple, conditional and relative clauses. Do you know what these are? Are you aware of them? Can you make them? If I was to say right now, can you please make a relative sentence? Would you be able to do that or not? And if not, where does that put you in conscious competence? Now, it might be you think, well, I sort of know what it is, but I don't feel I could do it. That's a really, really good place to be. It's a really good place to think, I sort of know, but I don't think I can do it. That's a really healthy place to be. A really dangerous place to be is, yeah, I can do it, and then not being able to do it. So it's really healthy if you think, I sort of understand what it is, but I'm not sure I can do it. So let's look then, a simple sentence. So a simple sentence is where one thing is happening and where one thing is being described. This is how I define it. And this is what I would call sentence A. So a simple sentence is where one thing is happening and where one thing is being described. I ran through the park. One thing is happening. Or the sky was black. Again, one thing is being described. So I would like you, please, to note this down. To note down what a simple sentence is, where one thing is happening and where one thing is being described. It doesn't have to be complicated at all. It can be really simple. The most important part of the sentence often is the punctuation mark at the end. End that sentence. These are very clear ideas. They're very uncomplicated. The sky was black seems like a really simple sentence, but a sentence like that could certainly be in a published novel, could certainly be in a piece of work for GCSE that would achieve the grade 9. So being aware of what you're doing and being able to put it on the page, even if it's something as easy as a simple sentence, is really, really important. So that's a simple sentence. Now, we have also the conditional sentence. So things happen as the result of other things. This is the sentence type that shows consequences. So, after I ate the cake, I felt sick. When I oversleep, I tend to get in trouble. So, conditionals are sentences where something happens as a result of something else, and you begin with the effect, I suppose. After I ate the cake, I felt sick. One thing happens as a result of something else. Feeling sick is the result of eating the cake. It's the way we can, on the page, communicate the results, the consequences. One thing happens, and then something happens as a result. And these two ideas are divided by a comma. Okay? Again, the conditional sentence does not have to be very long, but it has to show this idea of consequence. And you can begin these sentences with these subordinating words. After, if, although, when, because, and whilst. These sentences, these subordinating words, make conditional sentences. And if you begin with one of these words, after, the conditional sentence will sort of take care of itself. After I talked about rubber hamsters, apologies, I felt regret. After I did something, I felt something. So it's a way of thinking about the consequences, and you can begin these sentences, these conditional sentences, with the words after, if, although, when, because, and whilst. Okay, so these are two sentence types. We've got our simple, you can look at the top, you've got the A there at the top, this is the A sentence, simple sentence. And then we've got the conditional sentence, that's the B sentence. Now we are going to introduce the last type of sentence that we're going to look at today, and this is the relative. And relatives are, again, a complex sentence, and it's to do with how ideas relate to each other. So here's the first one. This is the subject, information, action sentence. the bit with the extra information that I'm sure you're familiar with. The man, comma, who ate a boat, comma, floated. Obviously, that sentence doesn't make any sense at all, but you've got the three parts of that sentence. You've got the subject, the information, and the action. This is a relative clause, that extra information about the man. And you can repeat this sentence in lots of different ways, with a subject, with information about that subject, and then with an action. These clauses, these embedded clauses, can work if you take the information out. The man floated. The man who ate a boat floated. And you can see this extra information is divided by commas. The comma is not a bit of fairy dust. It has function. And with regards to the conditional sentence, it points towards what the effect of something is. And with the relative, it points towards what that extra information is. So they're pointers. They have a real function. They aren't just fairy dust. And then we've got this last one, which is one of my favourite types of relative clause, when you have a statement of fact, and then you have a comment about the statement. And the example we have here is, we all decided to go horse riding, which for some was a bad idea. You can see that statement of fact that begins it there. We all decided to go horse riding. Then the comma, that pointing towards the extra information, which for some was a bad idea. And as you can see in these examples of relatives, we have these relative pronouns that are introduced: who, which, and that, and whom also. So the relative is a way of communicating a statement of fact about something, then adding extra information about that, some comment about that statement of fact, using that relative pronoun. Here we've got which in that second example, and then we've got who in that first example. And this sentence type is the relative, and I can clearly see that I've named it a C at the top there. So this lesson is about how to be a controlled writer and how to be aware of what you are doing. I know much of creative writing is about coming up and inventing an idea that can grab the reader, but creative writing is also important because it is, not creative writing is always also important, but controlled writing is also important because you want the reader to make sense of the information that's presented. And it's the making sense that is the point of writing after all. How aware are you of what you're doing? How aware when you're writing are you of when you're writing a simple sentence? The trick really is to think about the type of sentence that you're going to write down before you write it down. And I have quite a cruel exercise for you. So here is a code, and there are 12 sentences here, and you can produce a balloon story like Lunardi, or a plane crash like Roald Dahl, or any idea that you want. But you have to follow the sentence pattern. The first sentence has to be a relative. The second sentence has to be a simple. The third sentence has to be a conditional. And the fourth sentence has to be a simple. Okay? The second row, you begin with two simple sentences, then you move on to a conditional, and then you end with a simple. And this structure, which I'll show you in a minute, is a way of governing the type of sentence you write down before you put pen to paper. And it's really important that that becomes a part of your practice. When you think about what you're going to do and then you do it, that's what conscious competence is. If you just rush into something, you might not be aware of what you're doing, and the result might be completely random. So learning is a process of reflection, it's a process of looking back and thinking about what you might need to improve, but it's also a process of being aware. Are you aware of what you need to do to write well? Are you aware of what you need to do to produce controlled sentences? If you are, then your reader will make sense of your ideas. And this practice of writing in this way, writing using this kind of pattern, can be a really important tool in getting you to improve your writing. Now, I recognise that this week's half term, but these videos are, we hope that they will be an important reference tool for you as you continue your studies. So this is a lesson that I've taught many times actually, and it really works. When we become aware of our writing, we become aware of our sentence choice, we produce really controlled ideas and really controlled work, and it's really where the best grades are. So use our lessons that are already recorded on YouTube as a reference point, and this one is very much about how to become a better writer. Please follow us on YouTube, subscribe to our channel. Please look at what we're doing on our Facebook page, on our Lockdown Lessons page on Facebook, and we're also on Instagram and Twitter. If you have any questions about our content here, our lessons, please get in touch. If there's something that you're struggling with in English, please let us know. We're here to help, and we're going to be here until the end of lockdown. Again, I hope you're safe and well. I hope you enjoy your week off if you're watching this during half term, and if you're watching this after half term, I hope you have a great week. All the best, and take care of yourselves. Bye.